here. And it's great to be in Romania after quite a few years. My background to this topic is that I've studied cities, urban symbols, and then also ended up wanting to study European capitals of culture for my postdoctoral research, which I ended up doing as well at Bauhaus College Dessa. And we took part in 2 of the European capitals of culture back in 2007 in Luxembourg and in Sibiu. And we took part in the official programs of Sibiu and the fringe program in Luxembourg by these urban interventions that we did. What you see in this picture is the official symbol of Luxembourg and the greater region's European Capital of Culture year that Christian talked about a lot already. And it's a theme that would be coming in this talk as well. So I wanted to start with the idea of what is the European Capital of Culture. I found it interesting to try to investigate what is the Europe that is articulated in these European capitals of culture, in the actual year and the program, but also in the policy and in the transforming policy, because the policy has been there since '85. I don't know how well you can see that, hopefully you do. So Emilia proposed this program, and obviously in the beginning it was more focused on celebrating Europe and the very sort of classical instances of European culture, which made it also quite essentialistic, that this is exactly the Europe that we are presenting. And Europe would be about the classical cities of Athens and Rome, Florence in this case, Paris, etc. So there was a diversification of those cities later on, and especially from 1990 and from the case of the Glasgow European Capital of Culture, the emphasis shifted to post-Fordism and economy. So basically, reading policies on European capitals of culture, I've realized that also the Europe that is presented is not a cultural unity, but it's all about creating economic growth. So the economic policy has, in the past decades, taken over the cultural policy that was behind the European capitals of culture. This is my argument. And this is quite problematic, because I think that Emilia and others realize that there should be some more discussion about the European identity, us as Europeans in our diversity, and that these discussions should have been, in my opinion, continued through this policy as well. But instead, it has been focusing on the economic growth and the regeneration of cities. So it's been focused on the cities themselves and on sort of attracting maximum number of tourists to these cities. This is the most recent document that I got. It's from 2015, and it's from the official side of the European Capitals of Culture from the EU. So that's where I'm trying to emphasize it. Of course, building a sense of community has been important as well. What is community though? This can be discussed. And one of the key questions that already early on I got on this, got about is like whose money it is and where, and is it spent by whom and for whom. And most recently I've been studying some issues like populism and even like European intellectual space and other issues. Some of my research on the European capitalist culture is not very recent. I should be probably updating it, but also that means that this the original emphasis that I had was on the 90s, 2000s policies. But it hasn't changed, as you saw from the most recent slide here. But there are some problems of this kind of funding, which from the European Union is not very much. So it's very an awkward cultural policy, because it's not a policy with money. It's a symbolic sum that is given to the cities, and they are supposed to be running like a top quality program that is then also measured against what was originally proposed and what was achieved with it. And this is a problem because politics is volatile. I mean, you never know, and also economies are volatile. So economic situations might change, the powers in those cities might change, priorities might change between the application and the actual implementation of that year, and you are still evaluated on the basis of your original proposal. So it's also quite a tricky thing. The also question is, where is the money that is spent coming from? So of course one would think that it's coming from the tourists who would be flocking into that city for that year and in the years to come. And the success of European capitals of culture are studied based on consecutive hotel nights. So this is something that is relevant to consider. However, it's not necessarily the tourists or the state or the European Union that is funding those events. One needs sponsors, so this also requires a lot of networking and cooperation locally, and it's not a sort of a policy that would be then running itself in those areas. So here you can see how the European capitals of culture is presencing itself in Luxembourg, in the very center of the city of Luxembourg in 2007. So it's a cultural policy that is presencing Europe, EU, in Europe, in those cities in different parts of Europe in different years, and of course the memories of those European capitals of culture year will be continued. Also the practices that have been established in those years will continue. So there will be sort of enterprises that will continue after that, it is hoped. So how visible would this, how visible in this image, for instance, is then the European Union? And how visible is the cultural capital year itself? Like, so is it really about the EU presence? Well, here is the simultaneous cultural capital city, Sibiu. I haven't been to Sibiu since 2007. I don't know what it looks like now, so you would probably be able to tell me, has it all crumbled or not? The case of Sibiu was interesting because, of course, that was the year when Romania joined the European Union. And people were quite excited, and Romania was presented on a European scale through Sibiu. A lot of broadcasts about the sort of new member state were actually staged on this square, main square of Sibiu. And that had sort of beautifully renovated houses, etc. although when we discussed more deeper about it, it was more like the surface that had been painted and the houses, the structures themselves were not that much. That was a debate in that city that year. So like, how much is it for the sort of, just for the visuals? But it is also about possibility to know Europe better. I mean, this is deliberately taken as a kind of old set of European capitals of culture, not the new ones. Of course, the map would be much denser now, but it also shows, I mean, we would be invited to think whether we know any of these cities better from before. And also it shows the earliest cities and their sort of cultural, sort of their canonical role in this network. The declaration, the declaration of the European Capitals of Culture policy itself, where one at that point in 2006 was fostering cooperation between cultural operators, artists and cities from the different states, and yes, having witnessed both Sibiu and Luxembourg, there was cultural cooperation between these two places, although you couldn't really call it cities because Luxembourg was the whole region, and then it was Sibiu, which was almost like, you know, the whole of Romania at the same time. It was very much focused on Sibiu. And there was this emphasis on city and citizens. I don't know how many of you know, but in the 90s there was also a legitimacy crisis of the European Union. And the emphasis on citizens was taken up already in the 90s as part of Union's proposals. We didn't discuss about it probably here in Central Eastern Europe in the 2000s that much, because the Union was in any case kind of cherished and sort of in the same way as Finland, my own country, that joined in the 90s. We didn't really discuss about this kind of democratic deficits that much. We just were like, okay, it's going to be a better club than others. But so these issues were addressed then in the same way as we are having currently with the emergence of populism, sort of calls for against European Union, against elitism that is entailed, and so that the power is in Brussels, and the European Capitals of Culture program was supposed to then make a connection between citizens in different parts of Europe, and also between European Union and the citizens themselves. So it was supposed to be a response to these policies, and now I'm not sure how well that finally managed. So here is part of the most recent decision from 2014, which stipulates several issues, such as the richness and diversity that should be mutual understanding, that should be endorsed, but European cultural heritage, cultural and linguistic diversity, and then the emphasis goes immediately also to the creative sectors, etc. So all of this talk about heritage and diversity, etc., goes into the competitiveness and of cultural and creative sectors. So the language of neoliberalism, one could say, is already part of the language of the cultural capital policy in its endorsement of diversity. So what in this text it's quite difficult to separate these different dimensions from each other. As you can see from point 8, these cities are supposed to be raising the global value of Europe as the world's #1 tourist destination. So in many ways, the policy's attention has shifted, as I've argued already in 2015, and asked to the global value of Europe as a tourist destination. And it is then, there is this point, the ninth point, that would be then emphasizing social inclusion and opportunities of broad participation in the preparation and in implementation of this, and even like marginalized and disadvantaged groups and young people should be taken on board. So the aims of the European Capital of Culture are there are several aims that they are supposed to be targeting, and there is like some sort of a hierarchy between these, and there's an I haven't now looked at the negotiation of this declaration. I looked at the negotiation of those before in the European Parliament through Parliament's archives in Luxembourg. But it's probably that this have been really, like, some groups have wanted to include this dimension, but it's not integrated in the same way as the sort of the economic competitiveness argument is integrated into the whole of the it's kind of just an added on thing. Well, here you can see some people from in Romanian costumes dancing with ordinary Luxembourg citizens or potentially tourists in Luxembourg in 2007. Yes. And of course there's a part of the ECC, or ECOC, as a celebration of multi-level celebration as such, and it's also about multi-level cultural policy. So it's at the same time about the local, national, regional, and European. As was discussed already earlier, and it's not an uneasy thing to express all of these different dimensions and identities. There would be like articulating what is local and what is European is not always easy, and I wanted to emphasize this with this picture. So there's also in terms of the city marketing and boost to the local economy and culture, the ECC of course is significant, and there's like urban regeneration that would be taking place. But the question is of course like what is emphasized, who are involved, how and where does the money come from, and in this case, you've got a public art installation in Sibiu on the main square, and there was a lot of talk about this particular piece of art because many locals were thinking that it's completely foreign and weird, and why do we have this kind of thing in front of our main square? I've discussed the way in which the cultural capital year was spatially distributed within the city of Sibiu and cities of Sibiu and Luxembourg in another paper that I will be linking with you. But it's important to see how it has been mainly focused on the main squares, and even in Luxembourg those flags and the blue stag, the symbol was presented only in some of those places. And then one could also discuss the way in which some of these programs are just shipped from somewhere else to the city and then to be endorsed by tourists and the locals. And some of these art installations, for instance, are made with citizens themselves. Of course, I was part of a team that was doing public art interventions in both of those cities. We were coming from outside, and we realized this kind of disconnect. Some of our colleagues were actually from Romania and Transylvania, and even at least one of them was from Sibiu, had connections there. So it was sort of easier to negotiate with the locals about our art installations. It was not just that famous artist from somewhere brought it in, and then everybody would be like, wow, this is art in this cultural capital city. But also the question is then, like, how wide would you go in that region and in that city, and what kind of responses one would be getting? I'm gonna go back to that. Because then, of course, thinking about the region, that was my last question to Christian, that what do you mean by region? I mean, it's always, you need to have the region in, but and European Union has particular understandings of the region. Of course, the European regions, but here the trickling effects of cultural capital year, both in terms of economy and in terms of culture, would be of course different to different areas, and would be enjoyed in different ways. In the case of the Ruhrgebiet, the Ruhr area from 2010 is an interesting one, because they didn't want to apply as a city, one singular city. And they got this for Essen, but they actually celebrated the cultural capital year in all of those cities of that quite densely populated region that's sort of focused on industry. It's like the industrial heart of Germany. So they in their logo that is there, they wanted to emphasize the networkedness of that region, and regionalism as such. It was quite different from the case of Luxembourg, where Luxembourg would still be the driving force of that region, and you would have like commuters that would be coming from around that region to work in Luxembourg. So it's kind of more monocentered, and we went and saw a lot of some of the other cities in that area and how they were set, where the blue stag was in those cities, ish, for instance, that year, and one could say that it was somewhere there. So the question of the national European Capitals of Culture, ECOC, then it's interesting because it's always decided on the national level, with the exception of that Ruhrgebiet, the Ruhr area, where Germany could not agree on one candidate, but presented one from the east and one from the west, Rockau and Ruhr, to the EU, and then the Commission was having to choose between these two. They were quite upset about having to do that. So it's interesting how in this policy it's really outsourced, decision is outsourced to the nation, so they are really about the nation as much as they are about the city, etc. But and also the political volatility on a national level, not just the city level, can be troublesome for the European Capital of Culture. And this case is from Vilnius from 2009, and that's where exactly this kind of transformation was. Pro-ECOC people were in power when the application was presented, and when the year took place, it was actually a different vision, including a different vision of what cultural policy should be in Lithuania. That was the case. Here's a picture from Pécs in Hungary, also nicely renovated. But then there's been, I wanted to make a point about that it's not a smooth process necessarily. There are all kinds of conflicts and all kinds of different meaning making, and one can invest the European capital of culture with different meanings, Europe with different meanings, and the city as well, region. And so the whole negotiation process of what this is about takes place before the submission of the proposal, but it also continues afterwards. And it's partly due to funding, where you still need to secure funding for your event. And you are often reliant on also these private investors. What is being shared between the different cities? So of course, the question, and there's more recent research on this than what I know of. Then always, in a very interesting way, the whole declaration of the European Capital of Culture is about making sure that EU money is not spent in wrong ways, even if the EU money itself is peanuts. It's not that much, but there's a lot of this control over the usage of money, and so measurements of success and failure could be actually understood in many different ways, but here is defined in particular ways. So it's part of this again sort of suspicion over how do the cities and the citizens handle these issues, and there would be some like higher authority who would be making decisions on behalf. So like this kind of measurement culture comes with the policy, and you can sort of see also it's linked to like ensuring economic success of that. So arts and culture, that were from Melina Mercouri's perspective, like the key issue in the European capitals of culture, is more or less overshadowed by all of these other things. And so is the celebration of Europe. So it is a very interesting program, and can be understood in many different ways. Here is the urban intervention that I made in Sibiu with, obviously, the people of Sibiu. So the people of Sibiu made these flags that became the flags, and the European flag is actually been printed once and hung in the Netherlands as one of 12 flags, new flags for Europe after that event. But the issue is that the sort of unity and diversity and the possibilities of people actually participating in these events is not always that obvious, because the primacy is on economic sort of value creation. Also, having done this project in different parts of Sibiu, including the local marketplace and those sort of commercial places and the sort of symbolic heart of the city that was renovated, I can say that the response was very different in different places, but also it sparked quite interesting discussions about what Europe is and what it could be about. And that year was, of course, a nice year to do this kind of thing, because people were still generally hopeful of European Union. I wouldn't dare necessarily to make this again. We have made these flags in Finland with the European Finland a couple of years ago, but yeah, it's a special thing. I've written about the way in which Europe has been defined as through economy. As cultural policy, so the cultural policy is actually an economic policy, and in my conclusions I also discussed what Europe meant in these projects, and how there is a potential democratic ethos in the empty signifier that keeps Europe undefined, but constantly filled with particular meanings, yet in this project or policies, one could see how it is actually defined and try to influence locally, should have like multiple interpretations of Europe and celebrations of that. In another article I've looked at the competition between different levels of policy, implicit and explicit cultural policy. What does it mean? How does this competition take place? And how much of the time this is actually an implicit cultural policy of Europe. My background is in cultural policy studies. I did that for quite a few years, especially the time of writing these articles. But now I've been more focused on the issues that Christian already talked about on Europe and populism. And we are conducting studies on election time debates across the European Union for these elections in May. So that's what I'm mainly focused on at the moment. However, it's interesting that in the future capitals of culture, of course, there's the case of Veszprém. That was the same year in Hungary, and it was the same year as also the UK city was supposed to be named as the European capital of culture, but because of Brexit, they were not allowed to have that. And I took part in some discussions on international relations in cultural policy in Stockholm just in end of November, just before they were making the decision about whether or not to give Veszprém the title for 2023. And they were at pains because at the same time they didn't want to be giving a title to Hungary that has been violating some understandings of liberal European democracy. But at the same time it would have been quite difficult not to hold any ECOC that year in Europe. So I wasn't part of those negotiations, but there were some people who were in that event. It's been streamed and we discussed about that. Of course, then that goes into the stream of like, what does the European capitals of culture mean? What is Europe? What is Europe about? And who gets to define it? And the original aims of Melina Mercury. Yeah, I could talk about this for much longer in different ways, but I think I'll just leave it here for the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this interesting and full of issue communication on this object of European Capital of Culture. And I think it was really interesting what you mentioned, the fact that it's actually national in the end selection or competition, while it's supposed to be regionalized in a way and also Europeanized, of course. And it's interesting to see how a federal states like Germany had difficulty in the end to choose. And precisely on the point of the West-East kind of division we have currently on the European Capital of Culture, I would like your advice on this fact that we still have one in the West, one in the East, maintaining this kind of dichotomy we have between an Eastern and Western Europe. And as geographers, of course, we could develop on this. So what do you think on the fact that we maintain this system of two capitals, and actually it's also diluting because we don't know really. I mean, many people don't know which are the two capitals every year because there are two, etc. So what do you think of the fact of maintaining this double capital of culture, especially geographically marked? And also, even further, what do you think on the fact of having countries turning national countries that are selected? Could the selection be made at European level in a way? to have a real European dimension. We don't mind if it's in Romania, in France, in Finland, Estonia. In the end, it's a European event. So I don't know, ideas that, and you as an expert on the topic, what do you think about this situation?
Yeah, thanks for the question. That is a very relevant question. I've been wondering about that dichotomy myself. Of course, originally it was always just one city, and then because it became obvious that not that many cities could be given this title, if it's only one city, it was increased into two, and then there's also these sort of external cities that have been, like in this case, Novi Sad for 21, have been chosen, and then of course in the year 2000 there were actually 10 cities, and
it's true,
and that one could think whether there's, like, first of all, inflation that takes place because there are so many cities, and like if you try to visit all of those cities, you're going to be really busy, like really, and especially if there were more than two, that would be problematic. But if the main aim would be to endorse, like, economic prosperity for a maximum number of cities, and also to the second aim to get this European message connection to the EU, like to the local level, that it might make sense to have more of this every year. However, then the question about who selects the cities and why is it the national selection? I mean, this is what I've been wondering already a while back, and I guess in the case of Hungary, this was part of the problem, because all the cities that were shortlisted then would be cities that would be approved by Fidesz. And as the European Union has some issues with Fidesz, they also found it difficult to choose from those. So one could, of course, think that even if it were on the national level, the decision between the cities would be made on some international level. But we don't want to be wasting EU finances, as this is like the cheapest possible maximum impact cultural policy that you can imagine. That you only run like kind of a bureau that would be taking care of these applications that come from the member states where it's being outsourced, and you only give, like, is it now still 1.5 million to those cities. It's very cheap, so you would have to be investing more in this case. And of course there are other kind of symbolic issues in these kind of European weeks and these kinds of tools that could be used in this case. So it would require a change of perspective, I guess. But after each of the member states have already had at least one European capital of culture, they might also want to reconsider the duality and that sort of, and perhaps also the number of European capitals of culture. Again, let's see. Of course, it's possible that this whole program would be discontinued in the future. That there would be political pressures on European culture and identity as such. And even the economic sort of emphasis would not necessarily save it. So it's like just thinking ahead. It has been volatile on the local, regional and national level before, but it might become volatile also in the European level.
You are working on populism, you are working on culture, and I see that Hungary is going to have an ECOC, Austria is going to have an ECOC. There is a strong presence of populist parties and populist city control. Do you think that, how do you think that this presence of populist parties will change the discourse on ECOCs and the cultural programming, the importance of economic importance, and what sort of cultures will be promoted in these ECOCs? What do you think about it?
Yes, Well, I guess there could be more of an emphasis on national culture. So you present, for instance, in this case, Hungary as a European culture. So you're not necessarily seeking anymore to find Europeanness from somewhere, from the history of the city, and the cross-border dimensions, for instance, might be diluted to some degree, and as would ethnic diversity, which has usually been endorsed. And of course, with the case of Sibiu, and especially paired with Luxembourg, it's not just the German identity that was emphasized, but the original Saxon identity. So which layers would you, I mean, as identities, local identities and cultures are layered, it's about the selection of like which layers to highlight in those lists, always. But you would already see that in 2009, in the case of Lithuania and Vilnius, so you could say that this was kind of a populist government that took over and started to save money on the high culture dimensions of the cultural program. And that's also why there's been like an emphasis that what you promise you should be also delivered. In 2009, just after the middle of the financial crisis and its effects in Europe, also the local economy was shrinking, so they could not really afford to get all this high arts and culture in. So, yeah.
Okay, the college from the first, being European capital of culture, like an example, if you have two twin cities like Timișoara and Novi Sad, they are very close, 135 kilometers. I see over there, okay, it's Kaunas and Ești, no problem, they are very far, so they cannot work together like normal. But if exists policy for this kind of example, for this kind of, I don't know, like when it's very close, they are very close. If something happens between them, like new directives, new programs, new...
Yes, I think that's a very good idea, trying to work on that closeness. And it would make sense to cooperate more, because there was relatively a lot of cooperation between Sibiu and Luxembourg in that period. And then, because there had been already cooperation in the 90s with the case of Luxembourg's the European Capital of Culture, when they wanted to have Sibiu already at that point as a partner, and then it was kind of speeded up, that it was paired with the greater regions, so that even if Romania was not a member state yet. So, but the distance became kind of a problem. I mean, we saw that because we were in Germany, in Dessau, trying to collaborate with both cities and have programs in both cities. You would have to be traveling quite far, but I think he would be doing quite wisely to build more cooperation. And for some reason they have wanted to emphasize like quite far apart being cities, I guess, to have the message or the development in different parts of Europe. So they have been deliberately often chosen, not as the very close by cities, but something else. So yes, one should work on that, and also that would make sense here in a region that is not necessarily that well known for sort of Western Europe, like I mean, I guess for many the Luxembourg Great Region was not as a region well known either, but after that event it became clear, at least to those who have been following, that there is a whole catchment area of Luxembourg that stretches beyond. So yeah, that would probably make sense. And how would you then deal with the historical sort of ties and experiences as part of Habsburg Empire and these things. I mean, it would be quite interesting